Sommers is shitting himself in front of Zoro. Garling is the hidden boss of the Gorosei. Ragnir froze the Galley-ra giants. And Giga Chad, Saint Emu Nerona, graces us with their presence on Elbath. We open with a gaggle of very flabbergasted old men, making sure they are not senile and that their ears are clean, because they cannot fathom Emu going to Elbath themselves. Even mentioning that if Emu leaves the castle, something major will happen. With Shepherd Jupiter stating that more than anyone, Emu themselves understands what the consequences will be. And Emu shows us this through their understanding of the situation, stating that the events facing them are no mere coincidence. Arrogance, idleness, negligence, pride. Thou must cast aside these follies at once. All this was inevitable. Then we are hit with a series of panels showcasing major events that have led up to this, with Emu ending by asking Lily, Joy Boy, and Davy Jones if they will keep making Moo suffer. It was all set into motion long, long ago. With this, Emu descends into the abyss via an abyss circle that appears underneath them in the throne room. There is a lot to dissect within these panels, but for this video, there are two I would like to focus on. One is with Loki, and it implies that the world government had indeed discovered that Loki was the captain of the fog ship and that he is Harald's son. I believe this is where his special bounty came from, even if they did not realize that he also has the Nidhogg fruit. The second seems to be Emu wanting to retrieve Vivi, which makes sense with her being a Nefertari and with Emu's obsession with Lily. And I am starting to think that between whatever Emu is about to do here on Elbath and a likely successful capture of Lily while they are in the lower realm, will become the impetus for Luffy and the Straw Hats to eventually find themselves at the Holy Land, whether it is part of the final war or not. That really depends on if you think Blackbeard's the final villain or if you think Emu is the final villain. Or, who knows, in some way, perhaps all of these events culminate together in one spot, in one piece. We also get a showcase of why Garling is the secret hidden boss of the Gorosei, because he is putting the rest of them in their place. You gotta get that new blood in there sometimes, right? When the people who've been around for thousands of years are just not cutting the mustard anymore. We also see that York is in fact working with him, which I think we probably could have figured out, and that the Holy Land is aiming to produce more of the Mother Flame. So she kind of got her goal of being a celestial dragon, but at the worst possible time because of the food shortage. Garling is like, hey, York, listen. That Mother Flame might really help the scenario right now, so if you want to feed yourself, chop chop, get on it. And I think it is likely she will be successful with this, which will help set the stage for Emu to kickstart the planned flooding of the world. And listen, if you like my videos, please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. I can assure you at least I would greatly appreciate it. Back in Elbath, we cut to a hilarious scene of Gerd holding a captured Sommers like a toy, holding his two halves close together and demonstrating that they are like a magnet. So we can surmise, right, that one of the mechanics of the Gods Knights' recovery of their ability is an attracting force that pulls them back together, be it through a facet of Emu's powers, or somehow even tied to electromagnetism like in our world. We also get a fairly solid confirmation of an additional and what I think is the primary weakness of Covenant holders, which is the steel heart we saw with Sommer's last chapter. Zora wonders if Sommers would be able to reform himself if the heart was destroyed, to which Sommers absolutely shits himself. Like, look at this face. Look at this. This is the face of a man who fears for his life. Now, I mentioned during the last chapter that I believe this heart serves as a sort of core that's holding these immortal beings together. I'm also beginning to believe more and more in my theory that, like devil fruits, Emu's power is altering the lineage factor of each person he sets up a covenant with, and that this altered heart we see with Sommers is one of the effects that comes from that. Now in this section we are treated to a couple other comedic sections as well, comedic scenes rather, with Frankie scaring Usopp and Brook awake by asking if they want to become cyborgs, and Sanji hanging Killingham from a tree like an apple, along with totally ignoring him and his threats. Luffy also asks Loki what will happen to Gunko. Luffy doesn't know it's Gunko, but we do. And Loki explains that due to her being flash frozen, she won't die, but that Ragnir is the only one who can melt the ice. Now before we continue, let's take ourselves back to Punk Hazard, where we saw what we assume is the frozen Galley-ra giants. I would definitely expect them to be making a comeback here in the end of this story, because it is very likely that in the past, the wielder of Ragnir flash froze them, like what Loki did to Gunko. But in that case, it was to intentionally preserve their lives for the future, and that in this current era, Loki will be the one to use Ragnir to unfreeze them. I think this also makes it pretty clear why Rox knew he needed Harald for his plan to succeed, as that would bring him access to both the Nidhogg fruit, Harald's power in general, Ragnir, and those frozen Galley-ra giants. In any case, this truly is like being within the eye of the storm with how calm it seems. And Luffy, along with Loki, better finish eating and powering back up soon, because we are going to need them. As we see Nami continuing to put out the fires, she looks in the distance and notices something unusual in the sky. What Nami was seeing was the beginnings of a giant black lightning bolt that then rains down from the sky. I think it's cool that she seemed to notice it forming before it actually came. That's indicative of something Nami would know. Then lightning bolts start striking more of Elbath, and a gargantuan abyss circle appears in the sky above Oris Castle, and from it bursts 5 additional lightning bolts, but I think we can assume they are striking all over Elbath. With these strikes, we start hearing music, which might not be unlike the drums of liberation, only in this case, one might call them the drums of oppression. Da-da-da-da-don, dora-roar-roar, which maybe kind of makes me think of Kaido's laugh a little bit. But between the lightning strikes and the sound, the very landscape begins to morph and change, with the trees and the houses turning into homey-like demonic beings. Emu's arrival also results in an island-wide burst of Conqueror's Haki that starts knocking people out. Now, given the size of Elbath, this is almost certainly one of, if not the most impressive feats of Haki we have ever seen. Definitely like Joy Boy's Haki Knot or greater. And it helps show us just how far Luffy has to go. In short, Emperor or not, Luffy is not at the ceiling of his power. Loki mentions that this is the same Haki they felt before, and that it is coming from the castle. We then cut to the castle itself, and within the throne room stands Emu, whose facade almost immediately begins to dissipate. It looks to be quite painful for Emu as he begins to transform, blowing off the top of the castle and emerging on one of its peaks. Killingham and Sommers are in absolute shock as they realize that the Great One has come here himself. And then we get it. Something we've all been waiting for. A full-on reveal of Saint Nerona Emu. And let me just say, he looks totally badass. Like, Oda did not at all go the goofy route with Emu. His design is straight fire. Maybe even literally. He is shrouded in awakened flame clouds unlike any we have seen before. A strip behind him seems to have eyes in it. And he wields a hooked spear-like weapon. It looks really cool, and one end of it has flame clouds of its own. And he is striking a pose that reminds me of Enel, truly befitting the ruler of the world. And while I do want to wait for the official on this one to see what their translation is, part of his introduction box says he is both the world government's creator, I think that's pretty straightforward, but is also the holder of one of the first 20 abilities called the Devil's Fruit. My initial thoughts on this are that the 20 kingdoms were all ruled by individuals possessing these original 20 fruit powers, and that these fruits might be like the progenitor of all devil fruits, with subsequent ones falling into trees of sorts under these 20. I think it's also pretty safe to assume that the Nika and Nidhogg fruits are also from these original 20. Emu is clearly a devil of some sort, so I think his devil fruit might be something like the human fruit mythical model Lucifer, as Lucifer is known as the origin point of all devils. That about does it for this review. I will definitely be back later with more thoughts, but for now, please let me know what you are thinking in the comments. I would love to discuss more there. And with that, I would like each and every one of you to have an excellent rest of your day.